We start with multiple breaking news developments on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Late today, Donald Trump filing a libel suit against the Wall Street Journal over its new Epstein reporting. Also late today, Trump's DOJ filing a motion to unseal grand jury testimony about Epstein. Trump's new suit names Rupert Murdoch, the Journal's parent company, and the two reporters who broke that story. The Journal detailing a 2003 letter that Trump reportedly wrote to Epstein for his 50th birthday. The Journal describes the letter as, quote, bawdy. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. In the message, Trump reportedly imagines a conversation with Epstein. Quote, Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? And it ends with the line, Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. Trump denies the story. Quote, this is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. As for Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, late today, she filed a motion to unseal grand jury transcripts. But the process could take weeks. And as the Post reports, even if released, the material would constitute only a fraction of the evidence and investigative material that the FBI amassed during its years-long investigation. Critics pointing out it looks like Trump is trying to stall and dodge rather than actually reveal critical information. Greg Sargent in the New Republic writing, quote, Trump's only way out of this is to seek full release of the Epstein files. But he won't, and he can't explain why he won't. The more he calls for meaningless releases that don't provide real transparency, the more he will stoke conspiracism, and the more he'll appear in on the elite cover-up. Trump today getting hit with more questions.
Mr. President, why not go further than just unsealing this?
Mr. President, could you stand by to release the full files?
Christy Greenberg, MSNBC legal analyst and former deputy chief of criminal division for the Southern District of New York, and Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, join us tonight here at the table. Thank you both for being here. Christy, I want to start with you and this lawsuit. Trump going after Rupert Murdoch, the reporters behind this story, filed in Florida in the district where a judge named Eileen Cannon just so happens to be. I'm curious what you think is going on here and if he really has a shot at being successful in going after this story.
Well, if he's before a Judge Cannon, he's got a shot. But putting that aside, I mean, look, the Wall Street Journal knew this was going to happen. There had been communications days before this story broke where he was threatening to sue. So this can't be a surprise to anybody that he managed to follow through with it. Whether or not he has a leg to stand on, I think they wouldn't have published this story if they didn't feel very confident. And, you know, he has to show that they knew that this was false, that this was going to be defamatory. I believe it's a libel lawsuit. And you know, they must feel like they are on very solid footing as to where they got this letter, what their sourcing was, and that they reported it accurately. So given all of that, I think he's unlikely to succeed unless he happens to get a good draw with good old Judge Cannon.
Lisa, is there any chance here that a lawsuit could actually backfire on Trump in this case?
It could. And the way that it would backfire on him, Antonia, is through the discovery process. Because as you know, if a case were to survive a motion to dismiss, then the parties begin to exchange information that helps them prove either their claims or their defenses. As the plaintiff in this lawsuit, Donald Trump would have to sit for a deposition. And as an observer of prior Trump litigation, including both of the E. Jean Carroll trials,
right,
I can tell you that where Donald Trump has an opportunity to defend himself, he is always his worst enemy. He literally buried himself in the E. Jean Carroll trial through his deposition there. That's where he mistook a picture of E. Jean for his then wife, Marla Maples. It's also where he doubled down on the Access Hollywood tape and said that he considered himself a star. In other words, yes, when he said that stars could do certain things, he was absolutely talking about himself and describing his own modus operandi. Those were things that juries 2 juries of his New York peers held against him in the E. Jean Carroll case. If his defamation case were to go that far, Donald Trump would have to sit for a deposition, exchange materials. But of course, Donald Trump is counting, Antonia, on it never going that far. Because in the 2 lawsuits that he's filed to date against other media organizations, he has extracted settlements from them well before those things could ever happen.
So you think his hope here is basically that the Wall Street Journal's parent company is like, we want this to go away and we'll pay for it to get out of our face?
Yes, I mean, I think the Wall Street Journal's parent companies will first try what I suggested, which is to move to dismiss on legal grounds, to say that whatever Donald Trump's complaint says against them doesn't even meet the legal framework for a defamation claim. Now, we haven't seen that complaint yet. It hasn't been filed. If your viewers or you have noticed me like typing away at my computer, it's because I'm trying to find that complaint as soon as it's publicly available. All we know is that a docket has been created, meaning a case has been created online, that he has sued 5 entities or individuals, and that the case is described online as being a defamation case. Beyond that, we don't even know who represents Donald Trump right now. On the docket, he's described as pro se, which is the legal term for someone who represents themselves. Clearly, Donald Trump is not representing himself in this case. So there's a lot we still have to learn about Donald Trump's defamation case against the Wall Street Journal, its reporters, and Rupert Murdoch. But by naming Murdoch himself as a defendant, I think that's sign number 1 that he's hoping for a settlement.
So a lot still to come there. But then, Christy, on this effort to unseal the grand jury testimony going through your former workplace, can you break that down for us? And how likely is it that those documents, all that testimony, will actually see the light of day?
It's unlikely that those grand jury transcripts will see the light of day. The reason why is grand jury proceedings are in secret. Those are the rules. You have to have a reason to be able to say why it shouldn't be secret. It's some kind of law enforcement reason, an ongoing case. You're helping other kinds of law enforcement agencies, right? Here, the interest is public is interested, and the public could be interested in a lot of different cases. That's not alone enough to get a judge to unseal grand jury transcripts. So I don't think they will succeed here. Where they may succeed is getting some of the information that had already come out at trial, information that's already been public in other areas, or if certain people whose testimony is in those transcripts, if they would agree and not put up a fight to it. But I mean, the other thing to take a step back, even if any of this were to be public, this is grand jury testimony where the prosecutors went in and said, here's our evidence against Epstein, here's our evidence against Maxwell. Not against Donald Trump. I would be shocked if you saw Donald Trump's name anywhere in these transcripts. Right. Remember, A.G. Barr was the attorney general at that point. Even listing Donald Trump as individual 1 in that indictment was a huge battle. There's no way he's getting dragged into Epstein and Maxwell grand jury presentations. So he's not a part of this, and he knows that. So even if he were to lose with the judge and this gets unsealed, he's fine. It's not implicating him. And it's not really, I think, going to implicate anybody else, because that wasn't the point of those presentations. There weren't other targets there that they were looking to indict. So the base's interest in a client list and finding out all these other people who they believe may be culpable, that's not what you would see in this transcript. So this is a red herring. This is a way for him to distract from the evidence people are actually interested in, which are the notes from interviews of these various witnesses that they looked at in this investigation. And that he doesn't need a court order to turn over. He could turn that over on his own. The fact that they haven't, that's the question people should be asking.
Lisa, do you see this as a red herring, as a distraction? I mean, do you think people will be able to understand all of what she's just laid out here, that this is just a fraction of what's out there, and that there's other information the federal government has that it sounds like we still will not see? Mm-hmm. Are people, given the way this story has gone and this fire has just continued to spread, do you think people are going to be on to what she's just laid out there?
Well, I think our viewers will, but the larger populace that is calling for the release of these files, I'm not sure that they will, because they'll see this as a sign that Donald Trump is trying to be more transparent and trying to let the information be free. But for this terrible federal judge, there's a judge in the Southern District who oversaw the Epstein case, who I know, as we sit here tonight, is maybe days away from being demonized by this White House as just another radical liberal Donald Trump hating judge who didn't want to let the administration educate the public about the Epstein files. It plays, Antonia, right into their narrative about judges and the press, as well as into Donald Trump's efforts to protect himself and inoculate himself from the growth of this story.
So I have to ask you both quickly. Senator Dick Durbin published a letter today. He said his office was told that FBI agents were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. Is that normal? What does that signal to the two of you?
Signals he's running the show, right? Like in the past, pre-Donald Trump, you had an attorney general who was independent and who ran investigations because they were in the best interest of the public and the people. Here, if you're looking for any mention of Donald Trump, why is that? It's clearly to protect Donald Trump, to protect his interests, not because the public may have an interest in knowing that information. And so there has been a lot of questions about this decision, this 180, where, you go from February, where there's a press conference and we're the most transparent administration in history. You go from that to now you're not getting anything. What is the reason for that? How was the decision made? We got a 2-page memo that said a whole lot of nothing. And nobody is really being clear. It was an unsigned memo. We don't know who made these decisions. And this says to me, Donald Trump is the one directing the show.
Let you know something that I found out just last night. Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feelings. It's not just the end of our show, but it's the end of The Late Show on CBS. I'm not being replaced. This is all just going away.
This shocking and very sad announcement from Stephen Colbert last night that CBS is canceling The Late Show after 33 years. I've had the privilege of appearing on Colbert's program twice, and there is no one more generous or knowledgeable or astute or in sync with his massive audience when it comes to the things that actually make America great: truth, courage, humanity, democracy, and yes, comedy. He is a bright light and a beacon of truth-telling. According to the network, the decision to end the franchise, a late-night institution hosted for 22 seasons by David Letterman and the last 11 by Colbert, was, quote, purely financial and, quote, not related in any way to the show's performance, content, or other matters happening at Paramount. But it does come after Paramount, CBS's parent company, agreed to pay Donald Trump $16 million to settle his lawsuit, largely viewed as frivolous, over edits to an October 60 Minutes interview with then presidential candidate Kamala Harris. And only 3 days after Colbert criticized that settlement as a, quote, big fat bribe in the midst of an $8 billion pending merger for Paramount, which needs approval from the Trump administration. Watch.
As someone who has always been a proud employee of this network, I am offended. And I don't know if anything will ever repair my trust in this company. But just taking a stab at it, I'd say $16 million would help. Unlike the payoffs from ABC and Twitter, Paramount's settlement did not include an apology. Instead, that's good. Instead, the corporation released a statement where they said, you may take our money, but you will never take our dignity. You may, however, purchase our dignity for the low, low price of $16 million. We need the cash. Now, I believe that this kind of complicated financial settlement with a sitting government official has a technical name in legal circles. It's big fat bribe.
Joining our coverage, NPR media correspondent David Folkenflik. Molly and the Rev are still here. David, one, were you surprised? And two, your thoughts?
Well, yet again, we have that famous Jeopardy category of shocking but not surprising. It's one of these things that really is a signal moment. It is impossible to disaggregate it from the announcement just days earlier of the settlement. which was itself for a lawsuit that all the law professors and media lawyers and executives I've spoken to over the months about has said was perhaps one of the most frivolous things they have ever read and scrutinized. You know, it is true that late night is struggling. Colbert at the top of the heap in ratings, and you know, is clearly, what can you say? He's just a class figure and extremely funny, whether or not you agree with his politics. Just quite a brilliant presence, and he really made that show come alive. You know, hard to inherit a show from somebody who created it, somebody so distinctive as David Letterman. But he found his voice when he said, you know what, it's okay for me to acknowledge my take on the politics of the moment in the Trump years, you know, in particular. And that worked for him. It, you know, may have alienated conservative audience, you know, for a broadcast network, but nonetheless, it really made sense for him. And I think he brought a lot of insight, wisdom, and at times empathy to issues on the public sphere and in the personal scale as well. But that said, it fits in with a series of sequential actions that have been taken to kind of clear the decks so that Shari Redstone, the controlling owner of CBS's parent company, Paramount Global, can sell it to Skydance, a studio that's ultimately controlled by a multi-billionaire who's one of the president's supporters.
What is likely to be learned about how much getting rid of this show or ending Colbert's program, will we ever find out if that was something either hinted or promised or part of the deal to get the merger approved?
Well, I will say that one of the parties in this who has the most interest to be circumspect about it is the one who speaks out loud the most, and that's the president himself, right? So CBS CBS had actually fought this vigorously in court with lawyers making muscular legal arguments. So reading through them in I think it was the Northern District of Texas, and seeing what they had to say. And at the same time, their parent company was desperately trying to settle this, right? And they said, listen, we didn't, as you pointed out, we didn't do an apology. We gave $16 million to what? Grease the skids, essentially, to clear the decks is what's really happening here. Everybody understands that. Trump went out there at a point in which Paramount is saying there's nothing else to this and said, you know, I'm going to get an equivalent amount, essentially, something like $15 to $18 million worth of public service announcements because we're going to get them on the conservative side to do in advocacy of issues or standpoints that I think are important. And it was suggested it might be against anti-Semitism, in favor of the military, other things, but, you know, with a cast that he could embrace and that in some ways is consistent with his own agenda. Paramount disclaimed any knowledge of this. Skydance has been silent about it, but Trump wanted this to be out and known. And it's almost as though they've identified another sphere that nobody had really thought about as this is politicized. Public service announcements, that's part of the liberal media too. And I think what the lesson, if you're asking for a larger theme to do, is even though you have these major corporations with tons of money behind them that fund major corporately owned news organizations, in a time like this, many of them will bend to power too. And that is, you know, a signal question of our age. Will institutions that provide knowledge to the public through which they can absorb their world and make decisions for themselves as citizens, will they retain their independence? Or will they bend to power? We all have to make accommodations in life, and institutions do too, but this is more than an accommodation. And so the question is, was this done simply to cut losses, as CBS's parent company is suggesting and CBS is suggesting? It's hard to look at it in the spirit. Clearly, the message is not simply that they want to cut costs, but that they're conveying to an audience that's very important to them, the regulators who work for President Trump. They are seeking whatever they can do to strike and forge a peace.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump is doing his best to fight his way out of the Jeffrey Epstein mess he has created for himself. Tonight, filing a lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and News Corp and Rupert Murdoch himself for their report of his alleged birthday letter to Epstein. This while his Department of Justice scrambles to kinda appear to release some of the Epstein files in an effort, obviously, to placate his agitated MAGA base. We're going to get to the lawsuit in a minute. But first, the Department of Justice filed a motion to unseal grand jury information from both the case of late child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein and his associate, currently in federal prison, Ghislaine Maxwell. On its face, it appears to be a good thing because people want transparency. They want the files released. But there's a huge caveat here. Not only is the department going to redact identifying information about the victims, which they very well should, they are also going to redact identifying information about anyone else whose name might come up in the documents in question. Quote, the department will work with the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York to make appropriate redactions of victim-related information and other personal identifying information prior to releasing the transcripts. Obviously, all victim-related information absolutely must be redacted. But also, like, why redact the other personal identifying information? I mean, if you are trying to look like you're transparent, avoid looking like you're covering something up, that seems like probably not the best way to go about it. But that is not the only big revelation we got today. The top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which of course oversees the FBI and the Department of Justice, now says that Bureau agents were instructed to flag to DOJ about any Epstein records that mention Donald Trump. Get this is a new letter out today to Attorney General Pam Bondi from Ranking Member Dick Durbin, who writes this, quote, according to information my office received, you pressured the FBI to put approximately 1,000 personnel in its information management division on 24-hour shifts to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records, adding, quote, my office was told these personnel were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. What? And all this comes just a day after that shocking story in the Wall Street Journal about what the paper described as a, quote, bawdy birthday letter bearing Trump's signature written to Epstein back in 2003 before his first arrest. Quoting from the Journal's description, the letter bearing Trump's name, which was reviewed by the Journal, is bawdy, like others in the album. It contains several lines of typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, which appears to be hand-drawn with a heavy marker. A pair of small arcs denotes the woman's breasts, and the future president's signature is a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. The Journal says that inside the outline of the naked woman was an imaginary typewritten conversation between Trump and Epstein, the third person, which included this line, Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? And ended with Trump, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. What's more, the document in question was at one point in possession of the DOJ, or at the very least, it was something reviewed by Department of Justice investigators in their prosecutions of Epstein and or his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. To be clear, Trump denies having anything to do with the letter. He is suing the Wall Street Journal over this reporting after having threatened to do so. Quoting from the paper, in an interview with the Journal on Tuesday evening, Trump denied writing the letter or drawing the picture. This is not me. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story, he said. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women, he said. It's not my language. It's not my words. Of course, Donald Trump has written many pictures in his life, like the ones you are seeing on your screen right now. In fact, people have been surfacing these pictures all day. It seems to be kind of like a thing he's into, actually. I've got to say, when the whole Epstein story first resurfaced, with the 2-page memo from the Department of Justice saying, it's done, case closed, nothing to see here, no client list, no nothing, right? My first instinct was not that there was an active cover-up of stuff about Donald Trump in the files. I thought most likely was that this administration, people around him, had very cynically hyped up the quote-unquote Epstein files to reach and mobilize a certain quadrant of voters. And then they realized they had overpromised and were going to underdeliver. And man, did they overpromise.
This is something Donald Trump has talked about. The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office. What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information.
James Comer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. Can you confirm the status on them? We still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI. Yeah, the FBI, they're reviewing. There are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. And there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that.
But Bondi's obsession with the Epstein files wasn't just her freelancing. It's fair to assume it was coordinated with the White House, right? This is not an independent DOJ. Everything Bondi does is coordinated with the White House. The DOJ works for the White House in a way that no DOJ has ever worked for the White House since Nixon, at least. So then, and that's established, right? The question becomes, well, why did this White House abruptly shift course? Why did the DOJ come out last week and say, you know what? Nothing to see here. Why has Donald Trump been spiraling ever since? I mean, we know he and Epstein were friends for years. The writer Michael Wolff has a recording of Epstein himself saying he was Trump's closest friend for a decade. Back in 2002, he told the New York Magazine that he'd known him for 15 years. Fun guy. If we couple this with today's revelations from Senator Durbin, which are gobsmacking, that 1,000 FBI agents doing 24-hour shifts, tasked with flagging mentions of Trump in their Epstein research, and then the Wall Street Journal letter, as well as the fact the DOJ wants to redact not just victim-related stuff, but other personal identifying information. Well, I mean, at a certain point, the most plausible explanation for the facts is that there's some kind of cover-up here. The DOJ was tasked with vetting Epstein materials for mentions of the President Donald Trump, his buddy of 15 years, who said that Jeffrey Epstein liked young women. And then subsequently, a decision was made not to release any more information on Epstein. Now, the Wall Street Journal makes clear that we don't know if this letter bearing Trump's signature, previously reviewed by the Department of Justice, was among the documents reviewed by this administration, right? That, like, some FBI agent was like, whoa, gosh, you got to see this, and flagged it. But if it was, and again, that seems plausible if it's in the record, it's hard not to see why they might come to the decision to just shut the whole Epstein thing down. Alex Wagner is an MSNBC senior political analyst. Lisa Rubin is an MSNBC legal correspondent, just published a new piece about Trump firing Epstein prosecutor Maureen Comey, and they join me now. Alex, let me start with you because, you know, I am so struck by this Durbin letter, partly because Dick Durbin is not a showboat. Like, this is not a guy who's, like, going to go on social media and try to get attention. And is also not going to commit this to writing to the Attorney General without some real information. The idea that 1,000 agents working 24 hours and told to flag stuff, that strikes me as a pretty wild.
BFD, I think, Chris, is the official term for it. 1,000 of them, and the belief somehow, I mean, this is an exercise in hubris unlike anything I've ever seen. The idea that you're going to have 1,000 agents working under the explicit order to weed out the Trump stuff, and that's not somehow going to leak, but also Trump's strategy from the beginning, right? This is a person who in 2015 at CPAC is trying to impugn the reputation of Bill Clinton by mentioning Clinton's activities on Epstein Island. Trump is obsessed with Epstein. Trump gives, curries favor with people who are also obsessed with Epstein and what he's done. Trump plays footsie in interviews during the campaign, saying he will release the Epstein files, even if he sort of dances around it. He entertains the idea. Trump allies himself with people who are obsessed with Epstein, and then, Chris, populates his administration. The top levels of his administration, his attorney general, his FBI director, and his vice president, all obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. He does this on his own accord, knowing, presumably, we can only gather, Chris, that he himself is in the Epstein files. It is the self-sabotage to make these choices over the course of a decade, knowing that if he won, the chickens were going to come home to roost. And what does he do now? I mean, it is truly, it boggles the mind. The phrase own goal isn't like, it's truly, it is the most hubristic thing I've seen from a man who has pushed the bounds of hubris to the outer reaches of the universe. But this is a problem completely of his own creating. He brought these people in. They are asking for results. He built a movement on it, and now he sits atop it, potentially indicted in the crime that he has made everybody obsessed with. Unbelievable.
Well, I want to read one sentence. Remember, this is the President of the United States. And this lawsuit says that the statements that the Wall Street Journal made tend to so harm the reputation of plaintiff, President of the United States, as to lower his professional reputation in the community or deter third persons from associating or dealing with him. That's the President of the United States saying that this article by the Wall Street Journal are going to have people not want to associate with or deal with him. So he's acting like he's just Joe Blow, and he is beyond a public figure. And the lawsuit is also stating that no letter exists, that the Wall Street Journal concocted this. As David Corn said in the previous segment, long as there was a good faith basis by the Wall Street Journal, though it's hard to believe that they would not have actually wanted to see a letter, that still is enough. So the lawsuit, I said it before, I'll say it again, is really an attempt to intimidate the Wall Street Journal and to possibly deter other reporters from other outlets or other media companies from, publishing a story when they get information.
Well, and to wrangle back the narrative.
Right. Can I just do a quick follow-up on something you said about in that lawsuit? So it says that this what happened here with the Wall Street Journal will cause third parties, all right, presumably all of us, not to want to associate with him, right?
Yeah.
So is he saying that the release of this story is worse than hearing him on the Access Hollywood tape?
You mean grabbing women by the private parts?
Yeah.
That's what this sentence says.
Okay, I just want to...
I do think it is. I mean, to Michael's point, it's important to, when we went through the reporting last night as it broke live on air, but in the Wall Street Journal reporting, they did a number of key, very important things, Brandy. One, they called the president when they had reviewed everything that they had. They put their inquiry out to the White House and ended up on the phone with the president where he himself could weigh in on the story, and did. He denied it, and he threatened to sue, according to the Wall Street Journal, and they wrote that down. The second thing that they did was very clear about what this was. It wasn't Donald Trump himself writing one letter. There was a book that Ghislaine Maxwell had went out, according to the Wall Street Journal reporting, and sought out people, specific folks, to give birthday wishes to Jeffrey Epstein via these letters, compiled it and put it in a book. And then they ensured that they put in this reporting the description and also the actual words of this fictitious conversation that the president, Jeffrey Epstein, had that was written on this drawing. It was very detailed and descriptive. It seems like a lot of work went into this to ensure that the reporting was as solid as it could be.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it's not like some rag, right? This, as Donald Trump just called it a rag in his post, but it's not. It's a really great newspaper with really good journalists and a really strong editor-in-chief who, it was said, got the call from Trump yesterday.
Which,
and she
P.S. has a conservative bend.
Yes, that's true. I mean, the Wall Street Journal has been very friendly to Trump in general in terms of his policies and what he's done. The editorial board seems to like him quite a lot. And so it's kind of a weird enemy to state. But like he said in his post about, talking about recapturing the narrative, his post to his followers on Truth Social listed this as just the most recent lawsuit to file. He said, I've filed against CBS and ABC and the Pulitzers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is definitely, that is the messaging that he's sending out, and it's so effective right now. Right now, all of the MAGA people in his sphere, at least the influencers, spent yesterday having the same messaging. This is a nothing burger. President Trump doesn't talk like that. What is President Trump, a thespian now? Like he would do? Everyone was sort of really towing the line, except this is not swaying the die-hard conspiracy theorist MAGA base. It's just not. So, you have his lieutenants down the line that are really towing this line for him, but the base is still not having it. They are still focused on Epstein. They are still not satisfied with these qualifiers of what he's going to release. Any credible information, pertinent, what does that mean? I just think he's really going to have a hard time getting out of that, and he'd like to distract from that, but he is not able to.
Can I just make one point? I do think it's important to say that the reporters never want to be the story. And when I was on the other side of this working with reporters, and even now, you never want to be the story, the journalists and news organizations. But what the president is doing and attempting to do to news organizations and journalists in this country is a very important part of covering the second Trump administration.
And I think that's important because, Denver, what you're seeing here is part of that deflection is making everybody else the story but Trump. So right now, it's the press, and he doesn't want that story to be focused on his base. But as Brandy pointed out in her piece, which she talks about, I want to know what's in there in the files, but that could be a price, meaning for the press and for a lot of folks out there, but especially for his base. Talk about the potential price his base may have to pay if they get what they want here.
It comes down to this. I almost wanted to pretend to be Mike Flynn during this whole interview to see how you guys took that. So we could have had a lot of fun with QAnon. But here's the thing. You know what they say, far-right conspiracy theorists? Nothing to hide, nothing to fear. So right now, my question is, why didn't Congress, just like, Comer did with Hunter Biden, why wouldn't they want to call Maxwell to actually talk about the 50th birthday? Why wouldn't Congress want to have her to come there? I mean, you want the facts out, right, Michael? That's what we want to do, right? The other thing, too, is that, and it's something that's been bothering me for a long time on this, how in the heck, right, do you blame other people for creating the own conspiracy theory yourself? And when you're looking at the base, what they're going to see with the grand jury reports, right, we're going to see if anything is redacted. If they don't see all the evidence, they're going to spiral. And a lot of people I've seen the far right's trying to message out of this, well, look, we're Pam Bondi, look, we're going to get the grand jury records. Pam Bondi, it's the beginning of the end. She's gone soon. She's not going to last much longer in this administration. I think they're going to have a fall woman. I think it's going to be Pam Bondi. And also to Brandy's point, I think he is a thespian. You think he pretended to be other people when he made a lot of phone calls, planting himself into the press, if you all remember that. So there's that, too. Plus, he was on Home Alone. So I think you do have this issue where it's going to be very difficult, right, for the Republicans and the MAGA base to message out of this. And I think the Democrats can hit on this for years. I just don't see any way out for them, regardless of what they release. As long as they've waited to release this fever, the conspiratorial fever, rises and rises and rises and rises and rises and rises until crazy starts to eat its own tail. And I've told people for a long time, crazy has so much more energy than sanity. And if crazy starts to turn that ship towards you, you better watch out. And even if it's Donald Trump, if it looks like that he is protecting a pedophile, and it looks like he is the one that QAnon warned about, there could be huge issues. And if the Democrats attack this, and if Tom Massey and Ro Khanna's bill gets through and not this stupid non-binding resolution that Ralph Norman's putting out, HRES 589, things could happen. But right now, this is just a huge way to try to throw fog right into into a concert so you can't see the stage. And that's all Trump's doing right now.
Now to another major earthquake. And literally one that struck the coast of Alaska this week. Senator Lisa Murkowski called out her chamber for threatening to cut public funds for public broadcasting as local public media in her state were just that day issuing tsunami warnings for residents.
You don't need to gut the entire Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the entity, the program that provides for so much support, particularly for those in rural places. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is there for reason, and I think it has stood the test of time.
And yet, despite those comments, despite that warning, the Senate voted to defund public broadcasters like PBS and NPR. And then late last night, the House followed suit, leaving the funding for local stations nationwide up in the air. Joining us now is NPR media correspondent David Folkenflik. David, good to have you here. What do you see as the immediate impact of these cuts?
Well, I think that the people who are going to be looking most closely at it are throughout this public media system, which is, not top down. The network, NPR and PBS, don't own stations. These are community-based organizations. Some of them are owned by not-for-profits locally or universities. They're going to have to figure out what their budget worlds look like after October 1st. You have seen, since the president sort of made clear he was going to ask Congress for this, a bunch of stations see a spike in donations from local listeners, perhaps community groups in response to this. But they're worried that goodwill and those increased donations won't last for more than, say, 6 months to 18 months. And if all the federal funding goes away after October 1st, on average, NPR gets about 1% to 2% a year, PBS about 15% a year, PBS stations about 15% a year, public radio stations about 10% a year. That's a good chunk. But for a lot of stations, as Senator Murkowski was talking about, particularly ones serving more rural parts of the country, places where you may not have major community foundations, major corporate benefactors, it's going to be hard to pick up the slack. And those stations are already in situations where they may be relying more heavily on federal taxpayer dollars to subsidize 20, 30, 50% of their annual budgets. It's a huge blow.
Yeah, and look, conservatives have been after these cuts for a long time. They've tried to cut funds for public broadcasting under just about every Republican administration since Nixon. Why?
Well, when this was passed, it was 1967, the tail end of Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society, and PBS and then NPR emerged from that. But it was during the Nixon years they emerged. He wanted to make sure that these were not incredibly powerful networks that would rival or become like CBS, which in particular he really didn't like, or the other major New York-based news outlets. And so it's really a much more bifurcated system, which in ways has its strengths. And we're scattered, we have member stations scattered throughout the country and reporters scattered throughout the country to provide a sort of different look than commercial outlets might provide. But that said, Republicans have looked at that and said not only was that seen as an alternative to commercially owned outlets, they were also at times they felt biased toward the left, liberally biased, and why there have been critiques consistently from the left of public broadcasting as well. It's really been pervasive on the right. That said, I'd say I used to cover Capitol Hill. My sense was lawmakers for a long time wanted this as an issue. In the Trump years, they wanted it as a win.
And it's interesting to think about some of that programming, whether it's Sesame Street or the Antiques Roadshow, and how that could be thought of in some kind of political lens. In terms of the state of play now, what do you think the future of public broadcasting looks like now?
Well, I think that, there's going to be a heavy emphasis on the notion of the public that it serves, the public that it hopes to serve, whether in terms of listeners or major donors or community groups or corporations or, underwriters, a lot of players. You're going to see stations try to reach out, as well as other producers in the system and the networks themselves, try to figure out how do we reconfigure. I think you're going to see some consolidation. Some station managers told me they may have to close down their stations. Can public broadcasting fulfill its full mission as self-defined to reach as close as possible to 100% of the nation, offering free, non-paywalled news and education and entertainment and sustenance and discovery? They're going to try. They tell me they're going to try, but I think you're going to see real hard choices be made. And I think that public broadcasting in 2, 3, 5 years will look a lot different than it does today.
David Folkenflik, thank you so much for helping us understand all of this. Really appreciate the conversation.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents will be granted access to the personal information of millions of Medicaid enrollees in an effort to track down anyone who may be in the U.S. illegally. The agreement between the Department of Homeland Security and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services was described by a DHS spokesperson as an initiative to ensure undocumented immigrants don't receive Medicaid benefits. ICE agents would be able to see the personal information of about 79 million Medicaid enrollees, including home addresses and ethnicities. Earlier this month, 19 states sued the Trump administration over its decision to share personal health data with immigration officials. A hearing in that matter is scheduled for August 7th. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Dave Min of California. I want to dig into the Medicaid piece of this in just a moment, but you've got an exclusive letter that you've shared with us first here on MSNBC in regards to the conduct of masked ICE agents, especially in your home state of California. What are you asking for? When do you hope to get it by? And what could the DHS Inspector General do here?
Right. We sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Inspector General because this is not a Trump appointee. It's not someone who's crazy partisan. And we're seeking answers to the questions that all of my constituents are asking right now, that I am asking. We have seen the videos. We've heard the eyewitness accounts. These are people that are coming out of unmarked vans wearing masks. They're claiming they need masks because they're being doxxed. And yet we've not seen any data or statistics on how many of them had been doxxed. Judges have been doxxed, and we don't see them wearing masks. They are coming out. They're assaulting and kidnapping people in broad daylight. They're punching people in the head. Who are these people? Have they been subject to criminal background checks? Were any of them, say, involved in January 6th? Have any of them been cross-checked with domestic terror organizations like the Proud Boys say? We deserve answers to these questions. You know, if my local police were caught on camera doing anything like this, they'd be subject to investigations and held accountable, and yet there's no accountability, seemingly, for these ICE agents. I think we need answers and transparency. The Inspector General is the right person to go to.
I think you're probably right that this is the right avenue, though it will take some time, I think, to get those kinds of answers. The other side of this is, as we're seeking answers and asking questions about ICE's activity in L.A. and in other areas, we're also then seeing this latest agreement between DHS and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. What's the impact of ICE getting this kind of access to personal data?
First and foremost, I think people are growing in their distrust of government, and this is a huge problem. But once again, this is an example of the Trump administration breaking the law in just like obvious, clear ways, egregiously. There are laws in place meant to protect the privacy of our data. And we've seen Palantir go out there and grab people's data. Supposedly Elon Musk and Doge grabbed everybody's data. And now they're sharing this data in ways that are completely illegal. We saw the other day Donald Trump go after a personal political enemy, Senator Adam Schiff, sharing some of his personal data. This is deeply concerning for anybody who cares about the politicization of the government. And so obviously people are going to have a lot of distrust about sharing any of the information with the government now. And this is going to have huge ramifications for our society. People are not going to call the cops. They're not going to share information with us. But it's also another example of Trump flagrantly violating the rule of law.
I think when you say distrust of government, it feels like even though we've been talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files, the larger umbrella here is mistrust in government, the idea that the government is not being transparent, it's hiding things, it's protecting people who have more power than the average American. That feels like the central focus here. One of the things that Republicans have said about Democrats during the entirety of the Epstein, 2 weeks that we've seen so far, is where were Democrats on this during the Biden years? What would you say to them?
Well, I wasn't,
granted, you weren't here.
I wasn't elected, but, I think the chips need to fall where they may. There are allegations that Bill Clinton, a Democrat, was involved. Jeffrey Epstein, of course, was a major donor to Democrats. So if there's Democrats involved, you know what? If they actually committed any kind of major crimes, including pedophilia and statutory rape, they should be held accountable. But the whole point of the rule of law is that it should apply to everybody equally. You shouldn't get one set of rules for the rich or the powerful or for Republicans versus Democrats. This is what we see in banana republics. And I have a lot of immigrants in my district who fled from places where authoritarians were taking control, and they're scared because they used to see this exact thing happen. So we need to enforce the rule of law for everybody equally. That's just a basic principle of any democratic society.
I think the last thing I want to get you on is redistricting has become a hot term in the last few weeks because Trump and Republicans are pushing Texas to redistrict at a point where they wouldn't normally be redistricting in an effort to try to shore up the House Republican majority. In California, the governor has said, you do that in Texas, we'll do that in California. I mean, what do you make of this tit for tat that actually has massive ramifications on how people are represented in Congress?
It would have massive ramifications for my district. Totally. I don't know what my district might look like.
Yeah, and you're in a frontline district as it is.
It was one of the closest elections in the country last year. So we're prepared for a re-election in the district I was elected to represent. Obviously, the redistricting is out of my control. But I understand the frustration that many residents of places like California feel when we see people like Donald Trump, when we see Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, openly talking about how they're going to cheat and game the system to try to keep control of the House in very problematic, maybe illegal ways. I think people are fed up right now with just the sense that, there's one set of rules that apply to us and one set of rules that apply to Donald Trump and Republicans. So I get it. And if they're going to cheat, I think, as I've said before, I think Democrats need to stop bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. If Republicans are going to try to gerrymander 5 states, as they're talking about, maybe states like California, New York, controlled by Democrats, maybe they need to consider all options here, because democracy is on the line, and that's the background here. Every time Donald Trump gets away with another major violation of the Constitution, he gets one step closer to eroding our democracy, and there's not that many institutions left to stop him from just completely eroding and destroying the things that we all hold dear right now.
Yeah, and I think the redistricting thing doesn't get enough credit for the role that it played in a place like North Carolina in the last election, where Democrats were redistricted out of 3 seats there. Now, that was at a point where census data, that's the natural point for states to redraw their lines. That's what makes this instance so different. But I think that you're right to point out the tit for tat that's going on and why people might not be trusting of the system.
Absolutely.
For now, we'll leave it there. Democratic Congressman Dave Min of California, who had a late night in the House because why can't y'all do business during the day? Thank you for coming on.